Okay, so I'm going to go through the differences and overlaps of traumatic brain injury or persistent post-concussive syndrome and autism. And these are just two of the diagnoses that are often given to people who have a similar set of presentations. And I've done another video on the overlaps and differences between autism and borderline personality disorder, which have similar presentations. And there's quite a number of neurodivergent presentations that can often get misdiagnosed, especially in those who are parts of the groups of people who are underrepresented in the research. So I would say a sweeping generalization would be that people who are underrepresented underrepresented in the research, including people assigned female at birth. Um, Hold on, I have a list just so I don't miss any. Um, People of Black, Indigenous, and people of color, diverse people, intellectually disabled people, socioeconomically disadvantaged people, people in rural communities, older adults, and individuals with co-occurring conditions are typically not represented in sort of any research, but definitely not in the autism research. And so, folks that may fit most closely under the umbrella of autism are general are often um, misdiagnosed with psychiatric um, diagnoses. So whether that be borderline, just anxiety and depression, or bipolar, often there is a presentation that would more accurately fit under the category of autism, but because that research and the training has so focused on white, affluent, assigned male at birth, people without those other characteristics that I described, um, practitioners are going to often miss that someone might fit more accurately in the category of autism. Now, another area that is not too common for that to happen is traumatic brain injury, but there are very significant overlaps that can cause someone like myself, who was diagnosed with persistent post-concussive syndrome, to also have the practitioner miss the autism. And as I continue to learn about these less acknowledged presentations of autism, specifically in assigned female at birth people, um, I am just like continually coming back to that over the course of my life, there has been such an effort for first my family of origin and then my partner and workplace environment supervisors and psychiatrists and therapists to try to figure out what was wrong with me was what they were all trying to figure out. But, even then, after going through all of those different things, the other people's experiences of me, even my own experience of me, and trying to figure out, like, why is it so hard for me? Why can't I navigate these things? And why aren't these treatments for these various diagnoses that I've been given really like eliminating the problems or the difficulty? And the more I understand this high masking autism presentation, the more I'm like, wow, I think this really is the most accurate way to describe what's been going on for me all of these years. And I don't do this because I think that labels or diagnoses are important. I am interested in understanding all of this because I think it's really valuable to understand ourselves and then to be able to validate ourselves and share with others what kind of things we're experiencing so that we can ask for help when we need it, so that we can let go of the shame and the self-criticism that can come when we're not able to meet people's expectations, and to slowly begin to heal from that. And well, heal, I don't love the word, to let go of that, if that's what's right for us, and to be able to offer to the people around us and to ourselves expectations that match our capacity more accurately, and to tap into modalities or accommodations or treatments that might serve us more accurately. One thing that I recently learned, that I was um, every time I learn something new, I'm like, oh, that makes this make my life make so much more sense. But I learned that people, autistic people, tend to be more sensitive to any type of medication or like anything that they ingest. And I have always known that I was a person who had a just like super heightened response to like anything. If you even like brought a pill near me, I would have a response. So taking something has always been like wild for me. And I don't do well with any kind of mood altering substance, whether it be alcohol or um, cannabis, or I haven't even considered trying any plant medicines because, again, like even if I take like an herb, I would tend towards being suicidal with anything that you put in front of me, let alone, birth control pills and all the various things that they tried to give me to shift my behavior as I was misdiagnosed with all sorts of things, including anxiety and depression and bipolar and borderline. Um, and I was at different points on lithium and antipsychotics and antidepressants and anxiety and a birth control. And then most recently, my doctor was suggesting estrogen and progesterone. And I have just always been really clear that my body does not respond the way that most bodies do to those kind of things. And I have typically, the most common side effect for me with all of those things, and also with like any kind of, like I said, herb or supplement, or even like a NyQuil or an Advil, all of those things tend to send me towards suicidal thinking. And so I have just found, and alcohol and even caffeine. So I found that uh, none of those things are great for my system. And it was really validating to hear that autism might have something to do with that. So I'm going to go through today a list that I put together with the help of Gemini, which is Google's AI, and go through some of the overlaps between traumatic brain injury and autism. And I just want to preface with, it's not like medical information, and it's just to the best of my knowledge, given help from Google AI. And yeah, my traumatic brain injury story, maybe I should start with that, is that I was never told I had traumatic brain injury growing up, but there was a story that my family used to say, like, oh, imagine how smart you would have been if you hadn't fractured your skull so many times. Because when I was 15 months old, I had a fall and was told that I had fractured my skull. And then a second time 2 weeks later, and then another time when I was 3, that apparently I ran into a wall. And that all 3 times I lost consciousness, and all 3 times I had seizure activity. But back then in the early 80s, it was just like, all right, like take a nap and see if anything changes. There was no information on concussions. There was no like early intervention occupational therapy or cognitive rehab for a little kiddo with concussion or brain injury in the way that there would be now. And so it was just sort of a funny story, honestly, is how it was told, as if it was funny. And I then went on to have self-harm behavior of hitting my own head. And I also was a fainter and I fell into walls and glass windows and on the ground so many times. And so the number of head injuries that I've had is super high. So when I was not responding to all of those various medications and was still suicidal and having such a hard time, I went to more and more and more psychiatrists and eventually there was a psychiatrist who said, "Have you ever had a head injury?" And I was like, "Oh, yeah, there's this funny story that is told." And she was like, "Yeah, I think some of these symptoms could be related to head injury because they've come to understand that there's a lot of uh, symptoms that show up as psychological difficulties with concussion and brain injury." And so I went to see a neurophysiatrist, I think it's called, and he looked at my medical records from when I was little and had those skull fractures, and he was like, "Yeah, this definitely fits in the category of mild traumatic brain injury, and you definitely have the presentation of persistent post-concussive syndrome." And I was able to get these brain injury glasses, which have prisms and medical filters, this like light blue. And then I have added into my life like a whole bunches of uh, accommodations and modifications, and I live like a really beautiful, awesome life now. That I don't have that connection with the suicidal thinking, but I still have significant difficulties navigating interpersonal communication and interpersonal effectiveness and sort of the like traditional experience of relationships. I have trouble with change of schedule. I don't do well on vacation. I do best when I'm in a scenario like this where I'm in charge and I know what's gonna happen and I just like make it happen. So if I'm the client or if I'm in a social situation where there's not a clear expectation of what's happening, or it's just sort of like free for all communication, like at my kid's soccer game with other parents, I don't, I tend to have, I feel sincerely confused. I spend a lot of time feeling confused by any interaction that's not really scripted, like me being the coach and having a client and I know what's going to happen. And I know what my role is and I know how to act. Those things tend to go smoother. If it's just like, whoa, let's see what happens, two humans thrown together, then it's sincerely confusing to me, which is not necessarily characteristic of traumatic brain injury, um, and is not necessarily characteristic of the other thing, borderline, which I was diagnosed with at one point and don't fit the criteria for, but I always kind of wondered, like, what is all this stuff? So, anyways, I'm gonna go through this and hopefully this is helpful to anyone. If you do have any concern that you have had a head injury and that you may have post-concussive syndrome, I really encourage you to reach out to the Brain Injury Association. They have like local chapters in most states, and they are amazing wealth of information and can give you access to things like, what's local to your community that would support you. Like that's where I learned about my glasses. And interestingly, when I found this information, I talked to my neurological ophthalmologist and was like, "So what if it's autism and not brain injury?" And she was like, I would do the same stuff for you because they have such similar presentations. And these glasses are also helpful for people with autism and they work. This whole practice that's near me is like best specific to supporting people with autism and people with brain injury because they have such similar presentations in terms of the visual field. And I actually also did this other thing through them called multisensory training, which they typically prescribe to people, autistic people. And it helped me so much. And then I even did a second round, which like most people don't need a second round, but I need a second, third, fourth round of anything, it seems. I am just I operate best with a lot of repetition, a lot of support. I also did the SSP twice, so There you go. Okay, I'm gonna pull this up because it's gonna be easier for me to stay on track. Okay, so let's go here. So this is my little disclaimer. This is a general overview. It is important to, like I said earlier, acknowledge that the current research reflects a biased perspective. The historical underrepresentation of female BIPOC, gender diverse, intellectually disabled, socioeconomically disadvantaged, rural, older adult, and individuals with co occurring conditions in research studies means that our understanding of both ASD and PCS TBI does not encompass the full spectrum of experience. This bias can affect diagnosis and access to appropriate support. Supporting research that prioritizes these underrepresented groups is essential for improving our understanding of these experiences in all their forms. The presentation of both PCS, TBI, and autism can vary significantly from person to person. And this comparison, like I said, was developed in collaboration with Google's BARD AI and is intended for educational purposes only and not intended to be used as medical advice. Okay. I'm self-diagnosed autism. I had an informal meeting with um, a clinical psychologist who said, yes, I am seeing that in you too. But it was informal, so I don't have an official autism diagnosis, and there are benefits um, and liabilities to um, getting an official diagnosis. So if you're interested in that, I have a separate video about that, and I'll put it in the description. Okay. Shared characteristics. So if we're doing a Venn diagram, this is the middle of the Venn diagram. Things that show up for both autism and post-concussive syndrome, or TBI. Cognitive difficulties. So with post-concussive syndrome and TBI, these will show up as short-term memory and sometimes long-term memory difficulties, concentration, attention, processing speed, and executive functioning. With autism, it'll show up with attention, executive functioning, working memory, and cognitive flexibility. May also have uneven cognitive profile, strength in some areas and weaknesses in others. So I was really fascinated to see with this one that I don't have problems with memory or short-term either short-term or long-term memory. I don't have problems with concentration or attention, or processing speed. I do have some executive functioning challenges. So, with and I really I don't have any of those, but I have some of these. Um, and on here, so I'm good with attention. I do have a lot of struggles. I have some executive functioning struggles and a lot of struggles with working memory and cognitive flexibility. And I have a super uneven cognitive profile. So that was interesting. All the way through, I'm like, oh my gosh, I have way more of the autism than the other one, which is what happened with the borderline side by side as well. Um, yeah, working memory, if someone's telling me something and I don't write it down, it hasn't happened. Cognitive flexibility, I can be super rigid, super black and white, super literal. I have to really work to like get some flexibility with my cognition. And then uneven cognitive profile, I'm like whiz bang smart when it comes to academics in terms of book learning. Like if you give me anything in a book, I'll get it. Like I do so well with reading and writing. I'm also very strong in math and science. Any information you present in an academic format, no problem. I'll nail it. If you try to explain to me like social stuff or humor or I don't know what else. Even like understanding a movie, anything that has more of a social aspect to it, like a relationship aspect to it, I get so lost so easily. And my growing up, this was very confusing because people were like, well, you're so smart. Like, you're nailing it. In school, I was the top of my class the whole way through and valedictorian. And I graduated in the top 2% of my university, and I've always been exceptional in academic settings. I had a photographic memory actually until my overdose, and I lost it after that because I had some brain damage related to that. But I had a photographic memory to the extent that when I was taking a test, I could reread a whole page from my textbook in my mind's eye, and I always felt like that was cheating, but I that was the case, and I was really good at math and linguistics, which was my undergrad major, because it's a lot about pattern recognition, languages and math. So, super uneven cognitive profiles there. All right. Sensory sensitivities. So with PCS and TBI, you can get the increased sensitivity to light, sounds, smells, or touch. And the sensory overload can lead to headaches, nausea, or emotional distress. So certainly I have all of those things. Um, but with autism, sensory sensitivities are a core feature, can be hyper or hyposensitive to various sensory inputs, and sensory overload meltdowns are common. So, with sensory overload, I used to get headaches, but I don't have them anymore. And I used to get a lot more nausea, but I don't have that anymore either. And I used to have a lot of emotional stress, but I don't have that either. So, with brain injury, this stuff really shouldn't improve. But a lot of that was coming up because I was so overstimulated, and also some of the visual disturbance. And I think just because I was in so much like emotional distress from relationship conflicts and things, and that's resolved. So with autism having the sensory sensitivities be a core feature, like I still am as sensitive to light, sound, and touch, and smells. Um, and I would tend towards a shutdown or a meltdown, versus these. But I really don't have shutdowns or meltdowns anymore. Again, I just am able to um, really use my sensory diets effectively. Okay, social communication challenges. PCS TBI may struggle with social interactions due to cognitive difficulties, fatigue, or emotional changes. So that's making it more situational, and can have difficulty understanding social cues or reading body language. So I definitely have all of that. But then with the autism presentation, difficulties with social communication and interaction are core diagnostic criteria. So right now, like my symptoms or characteristics that interfere with being able to meet the expectations of society are social interactions and sensory sensitivities. So those are the two like core core features of autism. I just think that's interesting. Um, Okay, can include challenges with reciprocal communication, understanding nonverbal cues, and developing, maintaining relationships. 100% have difficulty with all those things. Okay, emotion regulation difficulties. We're still in all of the like crossover features, middle of the Venn diagram. With post-concussive syndrome and TBI, increased irritability, anxiety, depression, emotional lability, rapid mood swings, difficulty controlling emotions. So I used to have that. And again, now that I have more skills, primarily through all of my work with dialectical behavioral therapy, and I have a life that is really supportive of me, I don't have those things. Um, Autism can experience difficulty regulating emotions, leading to meltdowns or shutdowns, may have heightened anxiety, or be prone to depression. So, again, I definitely used to have meltdowns and shutdowns. Now I'm just really good of taking care of myself. Um, and I would say I probably test out to still have heightened anxiety. Um, and my, that's to be expected with either of these, and is not something that like negatively impacts my ability to lead a life worth living. So it's not I like accept it and support it. It's not interfering with my life. Fatigue. With PCS and TBI, persistent and often debilitating fatigue is a hallmark symptom. So this is very interesting because early on, this was one of my big symptoms. Was like I just had not no energy, but now I have lots of energy, and I think that is related to, yeah, to autism. While not a core diagnostic feature, many autistic individuals experience fatigue, possibly related to the effort required for social interaction and sensory processing. And because of the way that I have structured my life to be really supportive sensory wise and to reduce the pressures of unfamiliar or unscripted or unexpected social interactions, like I don't have a whole lot of the fatigue that I had when I was having to do like unexpected or unscripted social interactions all day working in a school building and having a partner. Now that I'm single and work at home and only interact with people during my workday that are in that like expected, like sort of scripted interaction of client and practitioner. I have far less of that unexpected social interaction. And I have, my friends who I see in real time, all like know me and we like operate well without it being difficult because they know my vibe. So I think because I've um, reduced the pressure of those two things, I have less of the fatigue. Okay. Characteristics that are more common for the post-concussive and TBI. Headaches. I used to have headaches all the time. No headaches anymore. I think part of that is my glasses. I think a lot of it is that like I keep saying, I've structured my life so that it's way more supportive. Dizziness, vertigo. I used to again have that all the time. Don't have that. Sleep disturbances. Used to have a hard time sleeping. Don't anymore. Nausea, vomiting. Used to be nauseous all the time. Don't have it anymore. Motor difficulties, weaknesses, or changes in coordination. I used to be super clumsy, have the hardest time with any kind of motor coordination thing. Like I couldn't drive or park or do any sports or walk down the stairs without having trouble. I would fall down the stairs like 2 or 3 times a week. I would run into every door frame. So a lot of my vision therapy and my multisensory training work and my glasses, I think, have really supported that. I mean, I have TBI and post-concussive syndrome. Like that's not up for debate, but I also am seeing that a lot of my stuff that's gotten better with the treatment for the TBI that is under the category of autism is still a part of my life because and with DBT, like those things haven't been eliminated. So, anyways, just interesting. I have both. um, I sleep great now. Yeah. Um, anosmia, loss of smell or changes in taste. So I don't have a great sense of smell. I never have. And I don't really like the way that I don't like food that much. So that may, I think, like I don't have a great sense of taste either. That may be at play. Um, I don't know though, because the food stuff may be more related to the like autism. Like I just have very particular preferences around food, and I have always been like that. So. I don't know. Characteristics more common in autism, restricted and repetitive behaviors, interests. A core feature of autism, I super have this. Super adherence to routines, super fixations on specific interests, and lots of sensory seeking behaviors. And I do have a repetitive movement that I haven't let myself use around other people, but really like I have quite a few like I like to shake my hands. I like to open my jaw like that. And I have a neck thing, and I have always controlled that. I also have like a lip moving thing, and a lot of stuff in my face, and I really work to control it. Um, and again, routines is so important. And I am like, so I get really focused on a topic and won't talk about anything else. And yeah, so that's a big one for me. Differences in communication style. So I don't have um so much of the like outward echolalia, but I definitely like run words through my mind and I'm really fascinated by them. I definitely I heard it described the other day as like often autistic kids will sound like they have an accent that's different than the people like in their classroom. And my whole life I've been told like do you like, are you from somewhere else? Like, what is your accent? But I just like pronounce things in my own specific way. And I definitely, yeah, have been told that I have unusual prosody. Difficulty with pragmatic language, huge. I have really hard time talking to other people and understanding what they want to talk about. And definitely take language very literally. I do not understand sarcasm at least 5 times a day. I'm like, oh, wait, was that sarcasm? Because I try to pay attention to it, but I take everything literally. And I do not understand jokes. And I do not understand when someone's being sarcastic or when they're trying to convey something that's like a nuance, and I just like totally miss it. Social reciprocity differences, less interest in social interaction or have difficulty with back and forth communication. Yeah, so I've always been a very low social person and have felt bad about it, like it's a problem my whole life because I grew up in a family of very social people. And I've always been like, what are we supposed to talk about? Like, do you not want to just like say all your deepest, darkest things and talk about the meaning of life? I'm so confused. Um, and none of these are in TBI. Onset in childhood. Symptoms of autism are typically present from early childhood, although they may be recognized until later. And TBI is after an injury. So this one's complicated because I had my TBI when I was a baby. So all of this has been present my whole life. Okay, key differences to consider. The cause of post-concussive and TBI is brain injury, and autism is neurodevelopmental. So, again, tricky for me to separate them out because um, I've had both since I was young, and for someone who had brain injury later in life, and they if they had autism characteristics show up earlier on, then they'd be able to sort that out. But we shall never know with me. Okay, onset. PCS and TBI has a clear point of onset. Autism is developmental, so it gradually shows up. Prognosis. PCS and TBI has a variable prognosis, with some individuals recovering fully and others experiencing long-term effects. Autism is a lifelong condition. So what's interesting about this one is that uh, the neuropsychiatrist that I saw said, like, yeah, you could definitely still be having effects 35 years after your brain injury. Um, But there was like three or four other doctors I saw who were like, yeah, there's no way that those brain injuries are still affecting you. And then when it actually came down to it, and I asked the neurophysiatrist to like write me a document saying, like, you have TBI and it's affecting you in these ways, and that's why you're having these experiences in life. He was like, yeah, I don't know if I feel comfortable writing that. Like, I'll write like you had that in your history and that like also there's some like potential psychiatric things going on. And at that time I felt like, what the fuck? Like, you told me that I had brain injury and that's where all my psychological symptoms were coming from. And I think there was a part of him that was like, there's also something else, and like maybe it is borderline. And at that time, I felt like really undermined by that guy. And I even honestly felt that way when I had the conversation with the clinical psychologist, that I thought was an evaluation, but that, again, communication difficulty. It was kind of funny because I had scheduled what I thought was a autism evaluation with this person. And then afterwards, again, when I asked for a letter, they were like, I don't feel comfortable giving you a letter. And I was like, uh, what happened? And there was a real difficult communication breakdown afterwards that I felt like was a characteristic supporting an autism diagnosis because I have a hard time with communication. Um, but all of that to say that with both of those experiences, I felt kind of invalidated. Like, oh, are you saying that you don't think I have brain injury and you don't think I have autism? Maybe, again, maybe my inference is like, oh, you're saying actually I have borderline, which I have had three psychiatrists evaluate me and say I do not have borderline. So I think it's okay for me to go ahead and let that go at this point. And I don't think there's a problem with fitting the diagnostic criteria for borderline because I have fit that at different times and I have not fit that other times. And ultimately, I personally feel that the characteristics of borderline just indicate that you have, like Marsha Linehan says, you don't have these certain sets of skills that are expected by society. And so you're gonna end up looking like you can't do the things that are expected of you, and you can learn them. Which is another interesting piece about the DBT for me is that even though I've taken it like 10 times, I um, I still have trouble with the interpersonal effectiveness skills. I still can't quite figure them out. And with the autism piece, that would make sense because that's the piece that I heard it described so awesome the other day that it's like a Mac and an Android. So iOS and Android. So it's not that either one has like a communication problem. They just don't communicate very well together. So like if you try to get a Mac to communicate with an Android phone, you have to use like all sorts of special um ways to get the two to communicate. They can communicate, but it takes a lot of effort. And if you want Android to communicate with an Android, they're so easy, right? So lots of studies have shown that autistic people can communicate with each other very well, very easily, and uh, allistic or not autistic people can communicate with each other very easily. But when you try to get them to communicate with each other, that can take more, it can happen, but it just takes more effort. And so I think that's a really great analogy for it. So, anyways, when I have despite all of the therapy and all of the supports, and despite being a person who's trained to help autistic people with social communication, I still struggle with social communication. Um, and I would like to say, like, I just social in one language and other people social in another language, and it can lead to communication breakdowns. Okay, I'm tired from talking so fast, and I know that was a lot of information. So thanks for hanging with me if you're still here. If you have any questions or if you want a copy of this document, just come to my website and shoot me an email, and I'll send it over to you. Lots of love to everyone. Take care.